The following program is captioned for the hearing impaired.
WGBH TV Boston presents Crockett's Victory Garden.
Welcome to Crockett's Victory Garden. I'm Jim Crockett. You see, we just picked our first cucumber here in the greenhouse for the winter. Today's feature, by the way, is going to be about tools for gardeners, for that favorite gardener in your life. And I'm going to talk about the tools that are my favorites and why they are that way. In our plant clinic, I have a very discouraged-looking jade plant. And then I'm going to show you how to propagate a rubber tree by a method known as air layering. But first of all, let's have a little progress report on what's been going on here in the last couple of weeks. About 2 weeks ago, you saw me plant an avocado that had some root systems started. The bud at that point was perhaps a ½ inch long. Now it's growing up here 3 inches tall. It's off and growing. Never make a great house plant, but an easy to grow one. And then you perhaps saw me cut an avocado, take the seed out of it, set some toothpicks in it to suspend it just above the moisture. A little water in this cup, roots coming out of it. The seed itself is split open, and before long it looks as though we're going to have a stem come right out of the top of here. Well, that's one of the plants on our progress report, but I want also to show you a bro-walia. To refresh your memory on this one, this is the bro-walia, a very, very handsome house plant and also a great garden plant for the summertime. Likes a little shade in the summertime, will blossom continuously for months and months on end. Well, it's a very slow-growing plant, so we've started some seeds 2 weeks ago. And here you see them, these little seedlings coming out of the ground. In another 2 weeks, they'll be large enough to transplant to individual containers, and by next May, they'll be as large as this other plant and ready to go into our window box or into our garden. That is the bro-walia. It comes in white as well as this lovely lavender purple shade. And then a couple of weeks ago, you saw me plant some alpine strawberries. And here you see them coming out of the ground. Tiny specks at this time, very, very tiny seed. Again, in about 2 weeks, they will form their true strawberry leaf and be ready for transplanting. Then about a month ago, I planted what we call streptocarpus. And the streptocarpus were planted here in a mason jar, and you can see these tiny seedlings. The seeds in this case were as fine as dust, so fine that I gave them this little greenhouse, you might say, made from the mason jar. They're now ready for transplanting. And these are so tiny that you cannot handle them with your fingers for fear of squeezing them to death. So I'm going to use the tip of a knife blade to pull out one of these little seedlings and show you how to transplant it. You might use something like a fingernail file or something of that nature. And pick up one of these little babies. If I were to do them all at one time, I would slip a table knife underneath them and take out several at one time and then split them. I set one in here a few minutes ago. We'll put another one in here about 1 inch apart. Those little fellows will come along in about a couple of months. They'll be a ½ inch tall or so and be ready for moving into individual pots. But here we'll put them an inch apart and probably get 40 or 50 in this one little pot. Now, in gardening, you always have to plan ahead. These will not blossom for 8 or 10 months from now, but you do have to start with them. That's the streptocarpus, or called the Cape primrose, one of the lovely plants from the Cape of Good Hope, related to African violets and gloxinias. Well, one of the things that you might like to do this week is to propagate some geraniums. We keep getting questions on how do you start geraniums. Well, I'll give you an idea. Here is an old plant that we've been saving. For what purpose, I really don't know. It should have been thrown away a long time ago, I guess, because we have a lot of young ones started. But from this, I'm going to show you how to make a cutting to make a young plant which will blossom next year. If you notice the difference in the color of the stem, this stem up at the top is pale green, and that's the part we're looking for. The brown stems, these tough ones down here, very, very difficult to make root. Now we'll take these and simply snap off the stem just like that, and you have an ideal cutting, something about 3 or 4 inches long. Now, although that's a good-looking cutting, it's not time yet to put it in the rooting medium. Just allow it to lie out in the sun for a full day. Now, I have done that, and I have here a cutting which I made yesterday, and if you notice, it's wilted. But don't let that concern you. This is the important thing. Down at the base of the stem, I have allowed the tissues to dry, and that will help to keep this from decaying when it's set into the rooting medium. Also, when you make a cutting of a geranium, I would like to leave no more than, say, 4 leaves on the cutting, so we have something about this way, and we are going to stick that approximately 1 inch deep into some sand. But before doing that, I'm going to moisten the bottom of the stem, stick it in some rooting hormone. That's all it takes, and tap it in like that. We'll let's make a little hole for it, set it right down in the sand. Now I would like to, I think it's a good idea at this point, to slip this into a plastic bag just for 2 or 3 days, put it in a place where there's bright light but not full sun. Then take the bag away. By that time, the cutting won't wilt very, very badly and will continue to grow, and in about a month's time will form roots. At that time, you're ready to put it into the potting soil and let it grow on from there. Now, another plant, a very expensive type of plant that you can grow from cuttings, is the Japanese or the English yew. That's Y-E-W. Excellent evergreen, needle type, and this is one which can be grown from cuttings, but I warn you, it takes a number of years to get them big enough to be very useful in the landscape. The ones that you buy from a nursery that are 15 inches tall are probably 7 or 8 years old. But simply take a cutting from the tip stems of the plant, simply grab those lower leaves and peel them off like that, so you have approximately 1 inch or 1.5 inches without any leaves on them. This part is going to go beneath the sand. Again, a little moisture, a little rooting powder on it like that, and here again, we'll put this in the sand. Now, notice that I'm setting this one off to one side in the pot because I can put 6 or 8 cuttings in a little pot like that, only a 3-inch pot. Now, do slip this in a plastic bag and put it in a cool, brightly lighted spot. Keep that sand moist all winter. By next spring, it'll form a few roots. Knock the plants out of the pot and plant them right in your garden, and they will grow from that time on. And that's the way every nurseryman does to get this kind of a plant. Well, now, let's talk about some gifts for your favorite gardener. And I have some things that I like, and I think that your friends would enjoy too. In the beginning, here a few weeks ago, I spoke about the fact that we had grown tomatoes in cages this year, but we had to do a little improvising because we couldn't find wire with these large 4 by 6 inch holes in it so we could stick our fingers through. We had to trim out the wire. Well, someone has come up with it. You'll find this at your local garden centers. Maybe this fall, surely next spring. From this, you can make 6 18-inch diameter tomato cages, which are 4 feet tall. You set your plant in the ground, put the cage around it, and the plant comes right up through the cage and cascades out of the top. You never have to prune the plant. You get immense crop, and what's more, every fruit is up off the ground where the bugs and the mud can't get at it. This is called the tomato guard, a very great idea for gardeners. If you have a friend that wants to raise prize tomatoes, well, that's one good suggestion. Now, there's never been a gardener that didn't need a watering can. Here we have a galvanized metal one. This kind has been around for 50 years or longer, practically indestructible. Now, I measured out on the outside of this and also on the inside where a quart and a gallon and 2 gallons came, because
When I want to mix up some liquid fertilizer, for example, put in a teaspoonful of fertilizer, the appropriate amount of water, and I don't have to measure the water each time. Speaking of watering cans, this is a great one I brought from home. I use it for houseplants. Holds about a quart of water. It has a long spout with in such a way at the tip that it doesn't dribble. It's a small stream of water comes out, and you can really water underneath African violets or small plants very nicely. A watering can, copper watering can, is a lifetime gift. It lasts forever. Then you may have, for example, a plant such as a gardenia that you'd like to mist. Well, here's a little copper mister. That's for something else on the foliage. And if you want something much less expensive, here is one made of plastic. Again, just a little trigger action, and you get this nice spray coming out. Again, while I was speaking about water, let's look at a garden hose. When you buy a garden hose, get one that's going to last for years. There are good ones and there are some terrible ones. If you've ever had those that you can't bend when the temperature drops to 40, you get pretty disappointed with it. Buy one that you know is going to be flexible, one which will stand the water pressure. When you turn off the hose at the end, the thing is not going to burst on you. A good garden hose lasts for many, many years. It's a cheap one might not last for 15 minutes, but a good one will last for a great while. And speaking of tools that will last for many years, how about a spading fork? This is a tool that will make gardening easy for any gardener. A four-pronged spading fork. Those prongs will go into the ground very easily, especially in a garden, a piece of ground where you've had a garden previously. Great implement. Hit the tines against the clod of soil, and it pulverizes it. Now, many gardeners are not familiar with a garden spade. This one, as you see, is flat across the bottom. It can be sharpened, lasts for a lifetime. I have one I've had for 30 years, still perfectly great. Get a good hefty one with some steel on the handle, something you can use it to pry under rocks or to cut sod. That sharp edge will cut through sod just like a hot knife through butter. A great, long-lasting tool. And here's a tool that you can make at home. This is my planting board. And if you've watched the program during the summer, you've seen me use the planting board dozens and dozens of times. A piece of pine 4 feet long, beveled on the bottom, as you see. I can tip that over, push it in the ground, and make a shallow trench for small seedlings. Then if I'm setting out seedlings, I have a marker, a shallow marker at 6 inches, a deep one at 12, a shallow at 18, a deep one at 24, etc. We can set our seedlings at whatever distance apart without bothering to carry a ruler out into the garden. This can get muddy, and the notches will still tell you where you're going to set the plants. Also, a little hole at the top allows you to hang it up in your tool house. Very inexpensive, but a great help in gardening. As we talk about some flower pots. These are plastic flower pots. And let me tell you what I look for in a plastic flower pot. One which will bend without snapping. You see this? This is a flexible plastic. Lasts for years and years. A great thing. And of course they come in many, many sizes. Flower pots are great. Another kind of a flower pot is one made of peat moss. This is a peat pot made of very thin-walled peat. Don't get those great thick ones, but get the thin-walled. This one is about a 2.5 to 3 inch size. That's just the right size to put say a single seed of a watermelon or a cantaloupe about a month before you get ready to put them in your garden. Plant one in each one and set the whole thing in the soil. The roots will go right through the peat pot. Your plant has no transplanting shock at all. Peat pots. Now, if you want to be a real gardener and you have some heavy pruning to do, get a pair of lopping shears. Now, these are double action shears made of steel. Expensive, but you'll never wear it out. It's a good blade on it, which can be sharpened very easily. Also, it has a set screw on it so that you can adjust it. A tool made of this kind of construction will stay in alignment so that whenever you go to make a cut, it'll be a smooth one and not a jagged one. A lopping shear, this is called. And then there are many kinds of hand shears. A little one like this is just perfect for cutting roses, snipping off little dead stems, this kind of thing that you can slip in your pocket. Sometimes you can get a little guard to carry them around in. A great tool is a garden shears. Now next spring we're going to grow some sweet peas and some ordinary eating peas, and we'll put them on a plastic trellis, just as this, a plastic netting. Now this is black plastic, which is not affected by the sun's rays, lasts indefinitely, can be used time and time again. This is 4 feet tall, tall enough for most plants. There are some that are excuse me, 6 feet tall for taller growing plants. If you've heard me speak so many times about soil testing, now there are many different makes of soil test kits, but every gardener should have a soil test kit. You know, I get so many questions here on this program. Why does my plant fail to grow? So many times I could say, didn't you hear me say that you have to test that soil so as to know what to do to it to make your plant grow? Unless the soil itself is right, no amount of fertilizer or anything else is going to do it. You have to know what you're working with, and that's the basic soil itself. Now, how about some labels? Now, I like plain wooden labels because if they get broken or lost in the garden, they disintegrate, and I don't have to worry about them turning up years and years later, the little broken pieces. Just a plain wooden label, and on that, along with that, get your friend a indelible pencil, something that you can write on here, good dark color, will last all season. The labels and a good indelible marker. Oh, here's another one. This is Blossom Set. Blossom Set is a hormone which you spray on the tomato blossoms early in the season for the first 2 or 3 clusters, where at the time of year when tomatoes have a tendency, the blossoms have a tendency to fall off and not to set fruit. Spray them with Blossom Set, and you'll get tomatoes on that first cluster and the second and the third before the warm weather comes. Speaking of another chemical, you've just seen me use this Rootone. There are several different makes of this, but this is a hormone for rooting plants. Again, another little quickie. How about just some rubber washers to go in the hose? As simple as that. Now, I find that the Cape Cod weeder is a great tool, been around for many years. It has a blade, a sharpened blade here, that you can pull along beneath the surface of the soil, and that will kill the weeds simply by cutting them off. And then we have this one, the Magic Weeder with the spring steel blades, and then of all things you end up with a trowel, and no gardener has ever had too many trowels. One-piece construction, soft handle. You won't get a blister using a trowel such as this. And finally, we get the questions of where do you get your seed catalogs? Well, go to your library and pick up a copy of Horticulture or Plants Alive. You will find at this time of year many seed catalogs are listed. Some are free, some are small charge, but that's how we get our catalogs and where we get our plants. Now we come to one of the features on this show, and that is to air layer a gangly rubber plant. And you can see what I'm talking about. Here's something nearly 7 feet tall, and for about 5.5 or 6 feet of it, it's practically nothing. No leaves, or a few poor ones down here. Now, if there was some way that I could get a plant, just this much of it, into a flower pot, I'd be all set. I'd have a young plant to start over again. This one is ready to hit the ceiling. Well, now, there is a way to do it, and we can make this plant have roots, this top part of the plant have roots, even while it's growing on the main plant itself. And I shall show you just exactly how to do it here. I'll lay this thing down where I can get at it. Now, this is a true rubber tree. This is the original rubber tree found in Burma, eastern part of India. When I cut this stem, you'll see some white latex come out of it. And don't be concerned, a little sap loss is not going to hurt the plant at all. By the way, that latex was what was first used to make a rubber product. The first rubber product was an eraser. I should tell you also, before I make a cut, that the sap in a plant goes up on the inside of the plant and down on close to the bark. And by making a cut across here, we will, you might say, form a dam. So the nutrients coming back down the stem come to this severed portion. The nutrients build up, and roots will form when I show you how to do it by adding some moist moss around it. Well, the first thing to do is to make a cut here on the stem. We cut in, in this instance, practically halfway through the stem, and pry it open, as you see I've done here. Now, I want to keep that open, and one good way to do it is to simply stick in a little piece of toothpick, and that will hold that thing apart. All right, now, we want roots to form all in this area, and the way to do it is to take some moss. In this instance, I have some long-fibered sphagnum moss. And I'm going to tie that moss onto the stem in a ball about the size of a baseball or a softball, perhaps. Lay a string down around the bottom of it to anchor it. We'll start building a ball of wet moss right around that stem, just like that. And we'll use the string to go round and round here and anchor that moss on tightly. Now, the point is to keep that moss moist until roots form. Well, it's going to take a month or maybe 6 weeks before there's a good root system formed within this moss. And the way to keep it moist is to cover it with a piece of plastic. I'll bring this thing right up here. Bring that around and tie it. All right, that's all we have to do to form the ball of moss that you see. Now, we'll take a piece of clear plastic, and we'll make a moisture seal. Again, we'll start right at the bottom and wrap that around and hold the bottom in place with a little plastic tie. Just like that. Now, we have the bottom secured. We can bring the top around and seal it at the top. Now, we won't even have to add moisture to this. During the rooting period, this plant will grow. The roots will grow right out through there. And we'll give you a progress report on this one a little bit later. And here is a called an ear layer growing with the roots beginning to grow right in there. Now, in our plant clinic today, I have a very sick-looking jade plant. I want you to take a look at that poor thing and tell me what happened. Well, I'll tell you what happened. The plant has been growing without enough light, and so it's headed right up in the air. I'll show you how different it looks from a jade plant which has had sufficient light. Now, here you see two plants approximately the same age and the same height. One looks like a spreading oak tree, and this one, I don't know what it looks like. It's certainly, I would say, on a plant like that, well, I'll save the flower pot, but I won't save the plant. But I will do this. I'll show you how, if this jade plant is something that you really want to save, then this is the way to do it. Again, I'll use a little bit of damp sand. Simply snip off a leaf, just like that. There's a snap right off. Take that leaf, make a little, put it about 1/4 of an inch deep in sand on a slant, like that. New plants will come out of there in about a month or 6 weeks. Pot those up, grow them in the sunshine, and you'll get a great, beautiful plant the way that other one was. Now we'll throw this one away, save the pot only. Now, if you have questions on gardening, would you send them to Crockett's Victory Garden, WGBH, Boston 02134. I have a few questions today that I would like to answer. The first one comes from a 13-year-old by the name of Edmund Grote, who said, how can I plant orange and tangerine seeds? Well, the first thing to do, Edmund, is to enjoy eating that orange or tangerine and then plant the seeds immediately while they're still moist. They'll grow, they'll get a beautiful evergreen plant. I'd be very surprised if they ever bear fruit in the house. Most of them will just grow into a kind of a pretty plant. This comes from Milo Kohak, who asks, recently you mentioned mulching pansies and mums with pine needles. Can they also be used to mulch other plants? When should mulching be done, before or after the ground freezes? Well, first of all, they can be used to mulch strawberry beds or perennials or rock gardens. Don't worry about the fact that pine needles may leave an acid residue in the soil, because you're going to take the mulch off again in the spring. The beautiful thing about pine needles is they're light and airy. The air can circulate so the plants don't get damp underneath and die, but they do shade the soil. We want to keep the soil frozen, so you wait until the ground freezes, then put your mulch on, take it off in the spring. Question about rose geraniums from William Ducharme, who planted a slip several years ago. It grew well and still does well in the yard in summer, but has never blossomed. People who gave me the slip had a plant with a beautiful big flower. Why doesn't mine bloom? The story is that your plant is just luxuriating in rich soil and plenty of root room. Now, next spring or this winter, take a cutting from your plant, grow it in a flower pot next summer, and then that restricted root growth in the flower pot, I'm sure you'll get blossoms. They'll be tiny lavender flowers and very delicate. Just bought a potted silver variegated English holly. This is from Karina Hammond. It's a female plant. Must it be planted now or planted in the spring? What conditions of care are needed if I keep it indoors? Well, don't plant it in this, at this time of year. Plant it in the spring. Now you have to live from, you have to be in an area of what we call zone 6 or warmer. They won't grow in a colder climate. Remember that you have to have a male plant as well as a female if you want berries. Grow it in a place with a little bit of shade. This is an English holly. Now, let's come to my tip for today, and this has to do with holiday houseplants that come to you with a pot wrapped in foil. Well, the thing to do is this. Go underneath the pot and cut through that foil in 2 or 3 places so that water can get into the pot from underneath, as well as water that you put in the top can get back out again. Otherwise, you might end up with a waterlogged soil. Worst way to treat a houseplant. One more tip from Crockett's Victory Garden. I hope you enjoy the program every week.
Funds for captioning this program were provided by the Bureau of Education for the Handicapped, USOE.